Alright guys, I'm going to set the memes aside and give you a serious analysis here. So people have been asking my opinion, and I believe that there are some things that need to be said. Once again, people are pissed off about police brutality, and they want justice for George Floyd. So I admit that I initially wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to this because I thought this was just limited to Minneapolis and just a bunch of dindus, looting some stores and stuff just because they're pissed about the ruling. But it turns out that this was initially going to be a peaceful protest until some people decided to riot and destroy stuff, and then the violence just spread all around the country. Then somehow I got roped into this. Well, not physically, but some people see me as the quote-unquote token black guy, so I'm going to comment. Okay, so first, let's look at the primary motive of the riots here. Now, first of all, we know that police brutality against minorities by Caucasian cops is not exactly a new thing. So all the time we hear the terms racism and oppression being thrown around in regards to black people. Do racist cops exist? Well, of course. They always have and they always will. But if you're watching the left-leaning news, whenever there's police brutality, one of the first things they focus on is race. An unarmed black man is being killed by the police. Yes, the first thing they're going to talk about is race and how it's a racially motivated thing. Although police brutality is horrible and wrong either way, if you look at the statistics, white cops are actually more likely to shoot an armed white man as opposed to an armed black man. They're actually more and more hesitant these days to actually shoot someone who is not white because fear of the backlash that they're going to lose their job because they're racist and so on and so on. But the left wants you to believe that it's all about race. And frankly, this works very well because when you have so many generations of people that were raised to believe that black people are just systematically oppressed and every little thing is against them, as well as the black boomers that actually lived through the civil rights movement that still believe everything is racist, the narrative that cops are racist by default is just going to persist. Now, on the positive side, it does put people on one accord and it brings them in unison, which is normally a good thing because they'll all come together and they'll actually take some sort of action, as they're more likely to have a common goal. But the downside is when they're fed a false narrative and given a narrative that's purely for political motives, that is when things get ugly. And not just for their own cause, but for citizens in general. So that being said, we're going to do a quick compare and contrast. So first we're going to do the obvious one, left versus right. Now, what does the left do when they feel violated? They riot, they protest, and they get crazy. But what happens when you violate the right? They stick to their principles and they often do nothing. Well, yes, they'll protest here and there, but their protests are often fruitless. Just take a look at Virginia. All that protesting, they brought all those guns and they cleaned up after themselves after the protest. What happened? The left passed those anti-gun laws anyway because they knew that they weren't going to do anything with those guns to begin with. Okay, so next we're going to compare whites to minorities. Now, why does the government listen to minorities, in particular black people? Because they riot. They instantly get together in one accord and they get the job done, even if it means destroying the entire town. It's sad, but that's just how it works. But unfortunately, you can attack white people all day and they generally won't do a darn thing. Why is that? Because A, nobody cares, and B, white people as a majority are divided amongst each other in so many different directions. Politics, religion, ideology, you name it. And with that being said, it wasn't always that way, because if you look back in the days where the Klan actually had a lot more power, the instant the word got out that a black man were to have raped or abused a white woman, you'd had every Klansman in the neighborhood saying, "Oh yeah, we're gonna get that nigga. We're gonna hang him from a tree and beat him like a piñata, and that'll teach any darky ever mess with a white woman, brr, brr, brr." And that's because white people were almost unanimously brought together in regards to race back then. Okay, there's something to be said when it comes to unity, and I'll come back to that in a moment because this point is key. But first we're going to do one more comparison, and in the West it's religion, particularly Christianity versus Islam. So let's take a look at Europe. When you piss off the Muslims, what do? They riot and they kill people, and they don't stop until they get their way. In the West, Christianity is mostly passive and pacifist. And with Christianity, there are so many different denominations, which is derived from the word division, of course, to the point where it's like nobody can agree on anything sometimes. Too many different customs, too many different practices, too many different interpretations, and so on. So, do you see the point of unity and commonalities here? So while those on the left are able to immediately, just like that, become triggered to the point of violence over one common principle being violated, as opposed to the right who's constantly asking, well, how do we do this? How do we do that? Man, we need to get some people together and finally, do X, Y, Z. So when it comes to the left, black people and Muslims, their power comes from their ability to mobilize quickly and cause as much damage as possible. And that leads me to this question. Why do they riot? The answer is simple. Because it works. Now, from the beginning of time all the way to present day, how do you stop a government from stomping all over you? You have to put fear into their hearts. And how do you make the government afraid of you? Use violence. Or, at the very least, showcase your ability to up. But when it's the majority of people fearing the government, then that's when tyranny is going to begin. So let's look back at an older dialect of English. Now, the words fear and respect were often used synonymously. So in a sense, you can kind of apply that here. Would you stomp all over a population that you respected? No, I didn't think so. And keep in mind that you can respect a group of people without liking or agreeing with them. So, am I condoning the violence that's going on right now? Absolutely not. Because if you look at what's going on throughout the night, they have been going into suburban neighborhoods and they have been killing random white people. At least as far as I can tell. Because there was one woman who had her husband killed and she was taken hostage by these Antifa hooligans. So when you start killing innocent bystanders that want nothing to do with this and are just trying to sleep peacefully in their homes, that is when you've crossed the line. And that is also when I don't feel sympathy for you. You see, it wasn't enough for the policemen to lose their jobs that were involved with the murder of George Floyd. There is this Black Police Association that involves United States, Canada, and UK black policemen that have been calling for his arrest. And roughly an hour ago, he was actually arrested. But to these protesters, that's not enough. They want blood. More blood. Although it's clearly the left that's just going crazy here. It's the right that can learn a lot from this. Not just on how to actually get things done, but how effective mass media and mass opinion really is. This is why they respond to the left, but they don't respond to the right. Now, I also want to touch base on what I think the potential aftermath might be. So first of all, let's just be frank here. This is not helping race relations at all. It's actually making certain people hate black people even more. I was in the Discord chat with somebody in a different server, and he was talking about how his mom was calling him, and she was just dropping N-bombs all over the place. Now, you all know me. As a black man, I do not care about the N-word. You can say it all you want until your heart is content, or even until the sun explodes. It's just a word to me. But adding fuel to a fire is not a good way to extinguish it, unless you're trying to burn everything. Now, at the very least, I could say one positive thing about the violence if it was focused in the right areas. Imagine if it was just directed at those 4 police officers that were involved and just allowed it to happen. They publicly beat them, and then they walked home and said, yeah, let this happen again, see what happens to you. That would definitely make cops think twice before they ever commit this type of violence again.
But no, everything must burn because racism. It is time for us to where we eat.
Second, now thanks to what we call the beer plague, a lot of major metropolitan cities are in the red because so many people are out of work. And when people are out of work, that's less taxes to be collected, and that's also less revenue coming into the cities. So now if you add millions and possibly billions of dollars worth of damage to that, it's just going to make things a lot worse. Now, I've already theorized that they're going to raise taxes all around the board just to make up for the losses this year. And if that's true, the financial burden is most likely going to be on you, the net taxpayers. And lastly, my biggest concern is that the government is going to pass some new laws under our noses in regards to this. Now, maybe this will happen, maybe it won't. Hopefully not, but if there's anything I've learned from the Obama days is that anything is possible. And the average person just does not seem to care at all. Now, in the wise words of Black Pigeon Speaks, he said, the government wants to maintain its monopoly on violence. I think that's a good quote to, meditate and think on. That being said, I'm done. Now get lost.